is the Ridiculously Amazing Insurance Agent Podcast, hosted by me, Kelly Donahue Piro. This show is for growing insurance agencies looking to maximize their biggest investment, their people. Listen to the top agency performance partners clients share their story on how they boosted their performance by executing a plan. Let's head to the show. Hey everyone, Kelly Donahue Piro here with the Ridiculously Amazing Insurance Agent Podcast. And I am so excited to have a long-term friend and fellow vendor to insurance agencies. I've got Charlie Griffin from the Kotter group, who is particularly in charge of the bridge product. And we have such a great conversation about how insurance agents should be selecting their insurance technology. So if there is anything that you've been wondering about, how do I do this? What mistakes have I made? We go through it all in this podcast. I can't wait for you to listen to Charlie and hear about some of the great things we've got going on. I'll see you at the end of the show. Well, hi everyone. It's Kelly Donahue Piro here on the Ridiculously Amazing Insurance Agent Podcast. And this time we took a little spin and wanted to interview a longtime friend, fellow colleague. And I've noticed a lot in some of the online Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups I'm a part of, that phone systems seem to be on people's minds. And so I wanted to pull on Charlie Griffin, who is part of the Bridge group, and really kind of dissect, not necessarily have him talk all about why his product's amazing. This will not be an hour-long infomercial, although I do hope he tells you some of the benefits, but more how should you pick a phone system, because there's a lot that goes into it. So I'm excited to have Charlie here. I'm going to let Charlie do a little intro for himself because I can't do it quite the same justice I'm sure he can.
Well, Kelly, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. So Charlie Griffin goes back a long time in the phone technology space. So I added that up not too long ago, and it's 31 years of being in telephony, and that's a long time. So happily married, 2 grown boys who are out doing their own thing and off the payroll. So it's a little bit about the background from the South. I grew up in Alabama and now we're in Georgia in the Atlanta area. And enjoy talking to folks from your area up there a little bit too. So now the background's always been tech. I took a little spin in 2007 down the interior designer role. So that's my wife's actual business. So we started a business for her, and I spent 3 years working with her, getting her going and learning the design business. And then she fired me, said, "I've got it. Go do something else." So I was back into technology. So, real glad to be here.
Did she design the office we see behind you for those of watching on YouTube?
No, she would be mortified that there was even her name close to it. So this is some of the original Kotter stuff from many years back, but it is not her handiwork. Now, if you ever got a chance to see our lobby, then yes, she did that, and it doesn't look anything like what I've done to my own space. So
that's the man cave, right?
It's a little, very much little man cave thing with pictures, whiteboards, random stuff that doesn't match anything or has absolutely no theme, right? So
all right, well, welcome. So I think would be important to do is, and I know in talking to you and talking to some other people kind of in the same space, I really feel like Bridge does something different than maybe some of the competitors do. So I'd love for you just to start and tell us a little bit about who Bridge is, what do you guys do? So that way our listeners can just get a little baseline of, why they should keep listening, basically.
So why do I invest another 25 minutes of my life into this? So no, great question. Bridge was always designed to be a communication platform for the independent insurance space from day one. And it was intended to become an all-in-one kind of platform. So literally, if you don't print it on a piece of paper in an agency, it can be done through Bridge. And so that's like, wow, okay, really anything. I'm like, really anything from telephony to e-sign to marketing. And all of that goes into one place. So it was kind of in response to too many logins, too many tech vendors, too much confusion and training to use 10 different products. How can we bring that into one place for an agency to simplify, workflow in their tech stack. And to do that, we had to look at everything that was in the marketplace, Kelly, because I'll tell you, we didn't invent anything we do, right? I didn't invent any of this. What we looked at was the premium people in the marketplace that did those single point solutions, like your DocuSigns, your Salesforce, your HubSpots. And then because we had been in the independent space for our entire lives, we took those products, applied them as an insurance agent would use them, and then stripped off the things that no one would use. So the theme was to make it simple, easy, and quick, right? I always use the Microsoft Word example. Everybody uses it, but there's only 10 things that you use, and there's 150 that it does. And those 150 just kind of get in the way, right? So we took out of that and created an easy, simple place for agents to do almost everything they need to do outside of the management system. So that's what Bridge, was intended, and where it comes into play is consolidating a tech stack, because that was confusing to people. And trying to work through different pieces of software, Kelly, if you don't do it every day, you forget how it's done, right? So it becomes less efficient, and people get frustrated. So we were trying to take that out of the market.
Absolutely. So if you could just give our listeners just like a punch list of some of the things that are included in Bridge, just so we have some point of reference, some examples.
Yeah, be happy to. So we started the building block, right? The fundamentals. So that's telephony, voice over IP, text messaging, faxing, voicemail, live chat on your website, video calling, screen sharing, automated marketing, drip campaigns, one-time messages, to-do lists, sales pipeline, CRM system, integration to most management systems to sync contacts back and forth and export data, and a way to track the activity of remote employees by doing screenshots, as well as full-blown e-sign system.
So when you add it all together, there really is a lot of features that you guys offer.
There's a lot of layers. Lots of layers, and it's not for everybody. Every layer is not, but the beauty of what Bridge is we single point priced it, so you didn't have to worry about who gets what, when, and where. So every agency is different, so they just pick the product up and use the pieces that fit for them, grow into others, move out of others, and run that way.
Or know if maybe you could lean off of one vendor, you might save yourself some money because it's already included in what you're paying for, right?
Absolutely. So the part of the design of the system was also not to fire hose an agency, right? I can do 14 things and you have to quit 14 vendors on day one. That's a big part of our implementation process, because no one has time to do that. And I'm not arrogant enough to think that our product's good enough to replace everybody you have. So it's modularized so that one can implement a couple of things at a time, which is normally the telephone system, and then start weaning off of one and adding other pieces and being trained up on it at whatever speed they wish to go.
Awesome. So being in the tech space, obviously InsurTech and all those words get thrown around a whole lot. And it's like the new cool word of InsurTech and things like that. I'm curious from you though, what do you see as the top 3 challenges you see that independent agencies need a plan for? So, I know that there's some things that are coming out that sometimes it feels like they're from the future, but I know in my experience, a lot of agencies like to talk about the 10 years from now, but there's so many things right in front of your face. It's like right here, right now. What are the 3 things you think independent agencies need a plan for?
Good question, Kelly. And I think they all kind of roll into one major category that all the other things kind of come through. The first thing that pops in my mind is noise, right? The InsurTech, like you're talking about, there are so many great companies coming up with so many different things that are being done that the agents are just overwhelmed, right? I talk to my friends at the agents, and there's just so much InsurTech that's out there. Some of it's great, some of it's not, some's new, some's useful, but it all sounds so awesome, right? And so it's just consuming a tremendous amount of an agency's time just looking at the options that are out there. That pops up with us every day. And so being able to have somebody help kind of guide you through the noise and vet some of that is is something that every agency, in my opinion, should get after. But really what I'm seeing in the market is, how do you deal with this new breed of consumer that you've gotten, right? The post-pandemic, during the pandemic and then post-pandemic has, let the genie out of the bottle of a lot of places, tried to put it back into some, but the consumer is so different. And I used to say that, and people would think, oh yeah, well, we don't care about millennials, right? The new breed of consumer. But now it's the 54-year-old man, the grandmother. They've all been exposed to doing business in such a different way in 2020. And that's how that's carrying over into 2021. So much more informed, and they've become so elusive now, right? Because Zoom meetings and social media, everybody's, I'm a little scared to get out there. Do I go out there physically? Do I put myself out there, on social media? And the culture has changed. And so the finding the buyer is different. Their persona is different now than our traditional insurance customer of, need X, get X, be happy with it and move on. And the technology tools are becoming so much more prevalent, in my opinion, going forward. Because what we saw in 2020 coming through that was, unfortunately, we had a lot of customers that went out of business. That very unfortunate, but it happened. And then those that came through, and agents are now looking at, did I make it through because I had the good stuff, or did I get lucky?
Sure.
Right? Did I get a free pass in 2020 because everybody was in this, whatever goes, it's okay, don't worry about it, don't rock the boat. And so we're seeing the technology now being evaluated in a much different way in the agent space of, okay, did this particular thing help me get through and thrive? No. Okay, we have to put that on the list, right? Did this actually increase our ability when everybody went to remote workforce to do? Great, we'll keep it over here and we'll keep that moving. And so it's that new breed of consumer, that new hybrid economy that we're working through, where we can't figure out, do I want to go see my agent, or do I love this whole video meeting thing and I'm cool with that? Let's keep working this way. Do you text me? Do you chat me? Do we phone? And taking all that into a new plan is the plan. From what I'm seeing for the rest of 21 and 22 is, what do you do with all that? That some of it was, schema shattering, and some of it actually confirmed the age-old practices from 1872, of relationship. And so taking the InsurTech, where you started with, Kelly, and going all the shiny new nickels in tech with some of the fundamental old school stuff like telephony and offices and paper, and figuring out how to merge all that into a good tech stack is the biggest challenge an agency is going to have over the next 6 months.
Interesting you say that, because my statement that I've been making a lot in the past quarter has been, my biggest fear for insurance agents is becoming Blockbuster. Like the slow, I remember in high school, like every Friday night we were at Blockbuster. Like there was no breaking the plan. You got the newest.
Right. Sure.
It was a big deal. And now I don't, I mean, I wouldn't even know where to go rent a movie, to be honest with you. Like it's also digital. And because people didn't adapt and change, there's one Blockbuster left. It's in Alaska. You can follow them on Twitter, and their Twitter is hilarious if you ever need a little break on life. But it's so interesting, because when I first worked for before InsurTech was a word, I was in insurance technology, and one of the owners wrote a blog that insurance agents are like frogs in boiling water. Like, you just don't necessarily see the fact that we all need to adopt some different ways of doing business. And to me, some of that goes into the idea that, like, our staff doesn't know how serious it is. And in addition to that, like, in insurance agencies, people don't love change, as I'm sure you get to experience every single day.
Yeah.
So many things have changed that we either need to master the art of relationships through technology and in person. Like, we need to be the best when someone calls in, or we need to have the best technology so no one ever has to talk to us. Right?
Well said. I talked to some friends about this, and they were like, we made it through the pandemic, right? Everybody was remote. We were doing video with our customers, and they loved it. And I was like, that's beautiful, but do you understand what just happened? No, I don't. You just became Geico and
Yeah.
Progressive and Allstate because you're using the same tools they've been doing for 5 years. You've proven the business case that your customers don't mind doing business with somebody they can't see.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in the tech space of the big box carriers, right? Now you got to learn how to thrive there, right? And that's that change I think you were talking about that people didn't want to do. Is that was then, let's go back to being the way we used to be, and the genie's out of that bottle, and your customer base is now at risk from anybody who has technology that works for that consumer. And I think the important takeaway with tech for any agency is to offer a customer options, that they can communicate with your agency any way they want, easily and effectively, and not have to worry about you forcing your preferred method onto me, right? And to your point, I think what you heard too is the same thing: is how do we actually implement that? Because it's a scary pathway.
Well, it's twofold, right? You have to find the right tech partner. Then you actually have to roll it out to your team, which is where we kind of come into play, which is saying like, hey, how do you get that? The team's gonna like push back because they like doing the same thing every single day for the most part. And a lot of agencies, in fairness to the staff, are not really great at managing change and communicating and training and explaining and working on it. It's sort of just said in a meeting, hey, we're gonna start texting customers. How, who, what do we do, when? Like I'm in my day-to-day bubble. I've been doing endorsements and quote, like all this stuff. And now how am I going to fit that into my world? What are you talking about? Like, or I don't want to text my insurance agent. Why would anybody else want to? They immediately kind of go into some of the challenges with it. And so, my question to you is, for the top users of Bridge, how did they get team buy-in? Because this is something we talk about a lot.
Right.
The reality is there's 5 reasons an insurance agent won't do something. It's they don't think they have time, or now is not the right time, right? They think
Mhm.
their staff's going to walk out if they change anything. And so
Right.
here we fear change. They get caught up in cost and expenses when the reality is the amount of time they spent researching vendors far exceeded the cost of sometimes the vendor itself.
Right.
They don't understand how it's going to fit into their general ecosystem. So it's a nice thing to have, and they're curious, but they don't move forward. And then the other one is they just won't do it until it's a necessity. And so we find like those are like the 5 reasons. But for you, when you see like, hey, how do you recommend, a 40-person agency change phone systems? Because I'm sure for some people it's like, well, that seems like a lot. I'm just going to keep pushing that away until we have to.
That's a good question, Kelly. And I think not a commercial part, but some of this I'll answer that question with specifically how do we do that? And it all starts at the sales process, right? So our entire process when we talk to an agency revolves around their workflows.
Mhm.
How do you do this? What happens when this happens? Is it good? Is it bad? Are you indifferent? The classic, consultative type of scenario before anybody would buy our product. And to accomplish that, and this is the answer to your question, is we require involvement from our customers. So when an agent comes to us and looks for Bridge, I've got an agency owner, the CSRs, producers, accounting department, everybody who's a stakeholder in the agency in a departmental level is part of our process. So, the most successful ones, they roll that out with team buy-in. It's an all hands on deck approach. We'll have a meeting with upper management. Okay. They have their set of things they're interested in. Then we'll have a meeting in the sales department, then the service department. And each one of those groups brings their very specific questions and needs and wants about a phone system to that particular meeting. And we walk through their workflows.
Yeah.
And so there's actual personal involvement the entire way through our process. Whereas, there's a lot of tech that just says, here's the shiny features, here's what they do and what they'll do for you. And you get it, and then you put it in and you go, wow, it's exactly like they told me, but it ain't going to work for us in this group over here. So we have to rip it out and start all over. So that's what we found the most successful is, I call it the all hands approach at the agency. It makes some folks uncomfortable, right, to have that much involvement. But I think, Kelly, to your point, having, a company like yours involved in this process as well is preaching the same kind of message of, getting a really efficient way to look at a tech product and who's going to use it to get the buy-in. Because I can promise you, our least happy customers, and we do have some, are ones where the owner said, yeah, man, I want this, we're going to get it, and we shoved it down everybody's throat.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work well. So, a workflow related by department methodology gets a very successful, adoption rate, with Bridge in an agency.
I also think we try to preach this to agencies all the time. When you're going to do a big change like a phone system, right? Every day, every person in an agency uses the phone, right? Let's just be honest about that, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times we're changing phone systems, and what goes through a staff member's mind? What?
Yep.
Like on top of all the other things I have to do today, you want to change phone systems when, legitimately the XYZ producer isn't doing, this is where you're spending your time, like that's what goes through people's heads. And we always say how you launch something is really critical too. Like, do you do a launch party? Like, hey, we have some exciting news. Like, we're going to be changing phone systems, and here's our pitch of why this is going to be great and why we decided to do it. Or do you just say, we're changing phone systems, have a nice day? And then, the agency owners in Maui, while you're changing phone systems, and everyone's like, what are we doing here? Right. And so we always say, hey, there's got to be a process, and to have real change, or whether it's technology or processes, you shouldn't rush it, right? Like, take the time, check in on it, check in on your team, find out what's working, find out what's not, so that they feel supported. But so many agencies just sort of push it and be like, here you go, deal with it, we'll talk to you later. And that's when you have epic meltdowns inside the office.
It's got to have an internal champion, right? I mean, and it starts at the top. I'll give you one of our actual largest customer has 2 or 3 more offices to roll out, and we're at year 2. Literally year 2. Now, there's nobody else in my business would ever tolerate somebody taking that long to start paying them money. But yeah, it's a 2-year rollout. Now, COVID slowed it down a bit, in 2020, but it was buy-in, go to the next office, champion. Here's why we're doing this, get everybody hyped up, maybe even do the pizzas, and then bring them on board. And so, yeah, that's the hardest thing with tech, is bringing people onto the boat and saying, you don't have to whip me to pick up an oar and pull. I want to. Let's go. Let's do this. This is going to be a fun time.
And that they feel like if it's not a fun time, there's a place to talk about it. And maybe it's either a user error or something to provide feedback on, right? And not just sitting there and slamming it down and being like, this is stupid. It's like, well, let's go through it.
Yeah, and we have, this is something you may actually talk about with your customer base, but we do this in our development cycle. It's an open door. We get everybody together. You can say anything to anybody that you want to. If you want something to be stupid, call it stupid. If it's a bad idea, say it's a bad idea to me or anybody. But we have that rule that says, if you don't voice your opinion, don't come back complaining about the outcome. Right. And that's one of the reasons we involve so many of the agency's personnel in our demonstrations and sales process, because I know agent owners, they got other things to do, and I want to try to help them at least mitigate that. Well, you never asked me what, I thought about this, or I didn't know it was going to do that particular function. And, but that's key, is get everybody involved with, to have a voice. And then once everybody's at a consensus, you move forward with it. Everybody pulls in the same direction.
So if you're sitting here looking around your agency thinking, I can't believe they just said that, or why is our retention starting to lag? Or what happened to our new business? Seems to dried up a little bit. Then your team might need a little bit of training. Let's be honest. Pretty sure that those Olympians right now are in the pool training, even though they're the world's best. So if we're not exactly there to be the world's best, it might be time to invest in some team training. And don't worry, we've made it easier than ever. You can actually train your team by just playing a 15 or 20-minute video in your team meeting. And we have it all in our online school, whether you want to tackle retention, time management, sales, reducing remarketing, or cross-selling. Our online school has resources for you. And don't worry, you don't have to do it all by yourself. We have a leadership guide that's included with everyone and quizzes to make sure your team has retained the information. So what are you waiting for? If your team meetings are falling a little flat, or you're thinking your team could use a little coaching and skill sets, hop online and go to agencyperformancepartners.com. Go ahead and go to shop and you'll find our agency performance pack. It's $245 a month and you can cancel anytime. So don't delay. Get your team the skills and the training they need to make it efficient and effective for your agency. So I have to imagine, you roll out your product and it's got all those features you talked about, right?
Mhm.
And so how do agencies kind of say, hey, we rolled out, because I'm sure 101 is, the telephony, right? Like, like, because if
Always.
phones don't work, who cares about, text messaging or anything else?
Sure.
So you get the phones working, and then what's the process look like to go back and start looking at all those other features? Because we see this a lot in management systems, right? Like they
Right.
core functions, they add a client, they renew the policy, they log a note, but then there's all these other features that make their life better that they just sort of either don't know about, don't remember about, or never fully integrate. So what does that look like in your world?
Well, you nailed it, Kelly. The phone is always first, right? Because if the phone's not ringing, the cash register is not ringing either. But during that process, I've got a separate group of people that I call the care team that's engaged with the agency directly while the boring phone stuff is being done, that are identifying those areas, right? So, okay, here's the big list. What are we going to, let's give me two that we're going to hit next. It's almost always text messaging and then e-signature, or the top two, that we're working through. And so we then engage them for training, right? So it's a training and add this into their workflow, create things for them to get them, jump started instead of here's the PDF instructions. We're right in there, dirty, hands-on, taking the engine apart with them and showing them how to build it back together. And then go, okay, we hit this, what's next? So we create that kind of a roadmap of, because out of the 14 things, 6 of them are going to be, we don't care. And so our care team will create that roadmap with the client and then the timeline for that roadmap. And we'll just keep moving those through and circling back until we get that whole thing covered that way.
That's awesome, because I do think it's important to have that process set up. Otherwise, a lot of stuff can get stuck on the shelf, and then, people don't know it's there, so they go buy another vendor, and it's like, whoa, you have it right here. Or
that's that breaks my heart, but it's happened so many, it's happened before. It's like, why did you leave? They offered me text messaging. It's like, we do this.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know. And then you feel so bad. So
we have some clients that literally have 5 different ways they could text a client, whether it's their phone system, their management system, another part, vendor. And then all of a sudden people are like, well, which one do I
right.
And
right.
something like it's collateral damage, like it just comes along with it. I'm always like, hey, well, if the management system texts, well, there's challenges. It's only one number, whatever the issues are. So they keep kind of stacking things together. But I love that, because we always tell people, and I know you're in this world, so don't take this offensively, but technology vendors are here to sell you something, right? And so you are in a sales process, and I come from an insurance technology background, so I can fully say this with all love in my heart, but they show you all the shiny stuff. We don't know where the dead bodies are. The speed bumps, the hiccups, the this.
Right.
Solution. And then it's like, oh, but what about this? And you don't really know some of those things because either the agency's never been through that process before, didn't think about it, or you come to the other side. So, I'm going to kind of skip a question ahead if it's okay with you, but I'm
Sure.
curious, how do you think agencies should select a telephone system for their agency?
Very, very carefully. Um, there's no way that you can get all the I's dotted and T's crossed. So part of the selection process, Kelly, that someone has to understand is you will not ask all the right questions. Your vendor will not ask you all the right questions.
Mm.
There will be problems.
Mhm.
There'll be misunderstandings. And the only role of the shopping part is to mitigate those.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the angst that I see on the backside, and this goes back to when I was in the beginning days of telephony, where we used to like hang stuff on the wall in the office. You never know for sure until you get it.
Right.
And to internalize that, be ready for that, and don't take that out on the vendor you chose.
Mm.
They didn't try to screw you over.
Right.
It's just that not everything can be answered or asked or explored on the front side. Even with a 2-week, 3-week, 1-month trial, it still can't ever be 100% vetted till 100% of your agency is using it 100% of the time. And to just dial that expectation down a little bit and then shop like you would for anything else. But if there's one like the permission to get on soapbox moment for the shopping, is the telephone system is the last thing you want to value engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you need to save money, if you need to cut costs, get a lower cell phone plan, cut your cable off at your house. The phone system for your business is a must have, do not skimp moment, right? I mean, you have to buy the most expensive thing, but don't shop it for the lowest price that you can get, because it's the only way you make money still, right?
Yeah, I
So
mean, we're not allowed to, you have to speak to people for the most part. And
still got to talk to some people one way or the other. It's changing over time, but the, the value part is not the driver. And I think, how do you shop? It's make intelligent choices, realize that the person on the other end's probably, their goal is to make you want to buy what they've got, just like anything else. But telephony is specific, and this comes from 31 years. I have never, literally never, no exaggeration, in 31 years had an installation of a phone system that the customer did not have a problem with, ever. And this is going back hundreds and thousands of phone systems that I've been responsible for. Not one single time did the customer go, "You nailed it. I'm
Yeah.
100% satisfied." Always something. So once that gets in your mind, it'll pull that angst down a little bit, right? Because
everything, right? Like you buy a car and then you're like, oh, I wish it was this, or I wish it did that. Like you buy a management system. Oh, I didn't realize it was this or that. And, one thing I want to dive in with you is, well, twofold. I want to say something about how we approach agencies buying any form of technology. I say before you contact a salesperson, you need to list out what it has to do, what you want it to do, and what would be a dream if it did. And then also come to that sales meeting prepared with like, I want to be sure, does it do this, 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 and this? Because I think what happens is that people start the process by reaching out on contact forms and they get put into a sales process and they never go back and remember, what are the things I'm doing this for? What problems am I trying to solve? So that I can make sure it's covered before I get the PowerPoint and the this and the references and all the other things coming at me.
totally agree. If you don't act like a normal consumer, right? What's funny, I watch agents shop in ways that normal people don't. I think is probably because they get tired of people shopping them the way they don't want to be shopped, right? And so it's this, everybody else does it, let me follow along. How much does it cost? What, boom, 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 show me everything. Instead of doing what you suggest, is what most consumers do now, according to what things I've seen. 80% of the buying decision's already made before somebody contacts the actual vendor. I've looked, I've read, I don't need anything. I should come to you with a list. And we get those. And I love those customers, those agents that come say, great, we've done this, this, and this. I got 8 things. Let's talk through them.
Right.
So what's your criteria? How many of these 8 do I have to be successful at? 6. Okay. Which one's a deal killer? Number 3. All right. We'll start there. Boom. And then at the end, you're not in this salesy kind of moment, right? You came with an agenda, answered the questions, you made a decision. We know yes or no how this is going to go. And it's a transaction or it's not. And you've moved on to the next thing on your to-do list. And that's the number one best way to do this, particularly in tech, because, I don't mean this conceited, but I'm really good at doing what I do. If you don't have an agenda, your agenda is going to be mine.
Right.
Right. And I think that's how so many people get things that don't work for them, is they come into it unprepared. No sword, no shield, no plan. And so they just get beat down by whatever the sales rep's going to present them with. And if it's a really, really good, charismatic salesperson who's been around a long time, you will buy stuff. I've done it before. You bought something you didn't really want.
100%.
Just, it's because, for whatever reason, dude, this guy clicked with me. He told me all the right things. It's like he's in my head. I'll take it.
Don't want to deal with it. So fine, you're here. Let's do this.
Yeah, and you get home and go, I don't even know what this is, much less why I paid for it. And so that's that's a good suggestion from us both to to the agents out there, is invest the time on the front end. You'll shorten your cycle and you'll protect yourself against one of my favorite words, getting bamboozled by a slick sales guy.
I want to just add 2 comments onto that. I think that one of the things agencies are listening to this, no matter who you are referencing in the world that you're going to work with, one of the top 5 considerations is vetting the customer support, because there is nothing worse than
Absolutely.
having a phone system and you're stuck on hold, or you have to chat, or you have to put in a help desk ticket to get frustrations solved. So you can look at all the shiny widgets, but none of it matters if your team has a problem or a question and they feel like they can't get any support. So that is, I call it like, that's the marriage contract, right? Like, the income, you want to have kids, like you like each other's families, but there's no communication, like the marriage
Right.
work. It's all on paper. And so I strongly encourage you to really vet the support and service of any vendor you work with. And we here at APP, 24, you will hear from everybody on my team by the end of the day, even if it's just, I got this and we're working on it, because there's nothing worse than feeling left to the dust. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Amen. I do. And I echo yours to the folks out there. I've actually had marketing consultants tell us that our Google reviews were doing bad things for us. I'm like, why? Because they're all about your service. I said, okay. For those who aren't seeing this, I have this look of dismay on my face going, that makes no sense. Well, that just means, that implies that you have a lot of problems with your product. I'm like, okay, I got a lot of customers. Technically speaking, that would mean there's a lot of problems, because there's a lot of people need a lot of work done. But to your point, that's what you should look for in reviews, is not it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Oh, the e-sign is so awesome. Great. That's either fake, or of course it is, because I'm going to say that because I bought it. Therefore, I have to self-justify my decision. So there we go. But hey, we had a problem and Jim over at Bridge solved it in 5 minutes, and I really enjoyed talking to them. They were easy to get a hold of. Those are the things, to your point, Kelly, that I think we lose sight of a lot, is if I bought the shiny nickel because I think it's going to save my agency and bring in sales because it's just that good, that's all I'm interested in reviews on, and going, did it actually work? So yeah, dig under the covers with service. And that's where actually referrals at that point come into play, is, a reference from somebody or checking around on a forum. to go, hey, when you had a problem, how was it resolved? Not, wow, I'm mad because I had a problem, because you should expect those, especially in a VoIP system. There's so many moving parts. There's something going to be wrong, not broken,
literally.
but it needs things done to it on a regular basis. So that sidebar is also when you're shopping for a phone system, understand it will never work perfectly, ever. Maybe once.
Doesn't work perfectly. Your computer doesn't work perfectly. Like there are things. I do want to say this one item, and if I make Charlie uncomfortable, I'm sorry, but this is what we do here. So I do want to say this, and I'm saying this because our podcast has 0 sponsors, and I do that intentionally. Charlie did not pay me to have him on here. Like there's nothing that's going on. So, and I say this because I think it's an important fact for agencies to understand, is that there are other insurance podcasts, which I listen to. I love their content. I am an avid listener. I comment. I think their content is great. But you have to be careful in vetting any partners that, is that partner paying some of the insurance podcasters or, people that are influencers in this space, because of course they are going to only say glowing things about that vendor. And I'm not saying that those things may not be 100% accurate, but what I'm saying is that needs to factor into your decision making of, hey, and we've seen this time and time again in different groups, and I love them, they're amazing, they're the greatest. We'll go to their podcast page and see who sponsors them and take that maybe with a little bit of a grain of salt, but talk to other agents using the technology versus sometimes the very big influential people out there.
Right.
So
well, you didn't offend me. Charlie is way too cheap to have paid to be on a podcast. So
you put it all in products, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, stand or fail with the product. Ours has issues occasionally, and it makes people mad here and there. And I may be one of the few people in the world that are still that honest about what they've built, that say it's not right for everybody. But to your point, when you look at those with tech, it's so different, particularly what we do with the internet, right? You can call your best friend down the street who's an agent and they say XYZ company is phenomenal. You put it in your office and it doesn't work worth a flip. Mm-hmm. Because your tech internally is not the same, your internet's not the same piece of wire, and your workflows aren't exactly the same. So with the podcast concept, even references online at social media or people when it comes to tech, need to have a filter, in that your scenario will be different than your friends or 12 other agencies, in this, association, because that's just the way it is. I mean, it's just like people, we're all just a tad different from each other. It's not a one size fits all. So be careful and put a filter on that as well.
As we're winding down, I want to ask you one big question and then find out how you can find out more about Kotter Group and Bridge.
Sure.
The big question I have is this, and I'm asking it because I think I kind of know the answer and I know how I feel about this. There's this big word in insurance of integration. And so in my mind, what agents see as integration is little magical data fairies come from one system and look at it and pet it and blow fairy dust on it, and then magically know where it goes in the other system perfectly because there's some kind of like human manual situation. When in reality, integration is just data mapping and garbage in one, garbage in the other. And so I know your system integrates with many systems. What is your take on this big, big word of integration in insurance?
No, you described it very well with just one. I'll correct you on one thing. Well, this is where we're a little bit different, Kelly, is that we use unicorn horn powder.
Oh, okay.
Instead of fairy dust. So our integrations are unicorn based, where our competitions are fairy based. And so they're much more effective when you got to tip him upside down and
sprinkle out
shake it all out of it. Put a grinder on his horn, but we're very sustainable. We don't always take the whole horn and let him grow back.
Process.
But that actually is integration. So it's a wonderful thing to map data. And at the end of the day, anyone touting integration, all we're trying to accomplish for you as an agent is to give you an opportunity to document things that you're not documenting now because they were too complex, too hard, or just too burdensome to even bother, right? Because most non-insurtech type of companies didn't care where you put it, so they didn't have any forethought into that to get data out and into a management system. So, but at the end of the day, that causes us a lot of frustration with us and our customers and support is I can only map the data that you have. And if you've decided to put phone numbers in a zip code field, then I can't give you the correct data in Bridge. And that it's a source of yay, it's a source of frustration as well, because if your data is not clean, then I just bring over dirty data and maybe speed up the process of you figuring out the data's dirty. We find that with our birthdays. It's amazing how many people's birthday data is messed up when they come into Bridge and go, let me send this, automated birthday email campaign. And out of 10,000 customers, only 2,000 of them meet the criteria for the system to actually send it out, right?
Yeah, or they're mixed up, like my birthday is my husband's birthday and it all gets, so yeah. People have to be careful with that word because it seems like I'm not doing it unless it's great. And I was like, it's like, it's great. And that's a huge tool, but don't think it's magical unicorns and fairies. You have to do the work and you have to understand how it works. It's not always the easy button. And then carrier downloads and things like that also play a part. How you deal with manual policies that don't download play a part. Integration is outstanding when all your processes inside an agency are super clean, but they are not always. And then each integration partner wants you to use a slightly different process. So it can have some issues,
It does. There was one system out there that just recently figured some things out where the downloads weren't triggering off things in their system to trigger off the things in their partners, integrations. And, they'd gone on for a couple of months and nobody really knew about it and could figure it out. And then it was like, oh, wow. Okay. And so, the integrations are great. Take it with a grain of salt. The one thing you can count on though, if you look at any other company, Bridge or whomever you want, in InsurTech, is pushing data from that system back to your management system should be spot on perfect.
There you go.
Getting data out of your management system and then massaging it and doing things with it in your piece of, InsurTech, like we're talking about now, is very, very subjective to the data. But moving it from my system to your system should be spot on perfect because I'm controlling the push of that data. So that should work fine.
You don't have complications like, like in downloads and things like that. Your data tends to be probably a little bit easier than the management system data.
Moving the call recording out of, Bridge into your management system is all my data going to your management system. So it's a very clean process. Whereas the other direction or bi-directional integration, holy moly. Now you don't even have a source of truth anymore when your InsurTech and your management system bounce things back and forth. I'm like, oh, Lord help us all.
Well, Charlie, this has been a blast, but I know we have to go to our real daytime jobs, right? So sure. If people want to learn a little bit more about Bridge because they've been impressed with you and how you approach things and all the tools that you have. What's the best way for them to get information about Bridge and not go through a sales process? Because everybody's going to come with their list now, right? Of the things.
Better. That's right. That's right. Our website, www.bridge.insure, is the best place to start. It's not salesy. It's very feature packed. It's just features. What does it do? How does it do it? So you can learn a tremendous amount about the system and do that front end research, Kelly. And then there'll be a form on there if you want to talk more, do a demo of the product. You can fill that out there, and one of the sales team will reach out to you and walk you through, that conversation. If anybody wants to talk to me directly, you can call me. I'll give you my number. It's 678-562-5955. I talk to prospects and customers all the time still. That's what keeps me sane instead of just being in the office type of environment. So I'm happy to talk to anybody. But the website's a great starting place. So I appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Charlie, for
My
joining.
pleasure.
And
It's been fun.
Yeah, to our listeners, hopefully you've enjoyed this and give you a couple tips, not just on telephony, but also other things in the agency. And we'll sign off now, and we'll see everybody on our next episode. Thanks so much.
Take care, Kelly.
Well, everyone, I hope that you learned a few things about how to select your insurance technology. I know it's not simple, it's not easy, but I hope you landed with a few good tips from some honest, unfiltered, unpaid for ideas. And whoever you pick, I think the most important takeaway is have your list ready. Don't get sucked up in a sales process. Instead, really stay focused. And when you do that, you're going to end up with some great results. We'll see you on the next Ridiculously Amazing Insurance Agent Podcast.